everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
There are limitations in all healthcare sectors,
Correct.
not just this country,
Yes.
where the numbers will surpass the amount of doctors
Yes.
and nurses to provide that quality care. When we're talking about holding a patient's hand, giving them the support, emotional support that they need, advice, that gap.
Yes.
You are providing that pivotal gap, so that really makes you stand out from all other NGOs as far as my experience goes.
Yes, I actually go into the homes also of the patient.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
WESN.
Well, thankfully, it seems as though the CARICOM situation has died down for a bit. I hope that that doesn't mean that we won't get a proper resolution to the he said, she said situation that was going on, where at the end of the day, everything was seemingly up in the air, and we didn't necessarily have enough concrete evidence to get a clear picture of what actually went wrong, of what actually the issue is, of why should it matter to us. And hopefully, our leaders would, I don't know, figure out a way to settle this and move on. You can't always take it for granted that that's the case. That said, we probably should move on, given the fact that there are other stories in the news this morning. One of the things that I wanted to take issue with, and I want to speak about it now, is, well, the fact that criminals are creative. It is a testament to the parts of our education system and the intelligence of our people, the parts of the education system that work. And there are a couple of incidents that, one was not necessarily that new or shouldn't take you that much by surprise if you follow the news, while another was something I never even considered. Now, the first one, there's a report this morning where the police are highlighting the use of dating apps, but this is mainly the gay dating app, Greendot. Now, from what I understand, they will record the victims of extortion after meeting them on the dating app, right? And my assumption is these individuals might be men or women who are not public with their sexual preferences. And the recording of the encounters will then, that's the effectiveness of the threat. We will reveal, we will expose you in a very public and potentially, graphic manner, or pay up. Now, I don't necessarily know anybody who is even in a position to face a threat like this. Most of the people I know who are gay, they are relatively open enough where I don't expect this would be an issue, although there is always just the basic threat of, regardless of your sexual preferences, that I don't want private images of me out in public, right? But usually, when it comes to that kind of extortion, there's another layer. So say you catch a married man with someone who is not his wife, something like that. Or in the case of if people are trying to keep certain aspects of their private life private, especially since in Trinidad, it is not necessarily clear to me exactly as a society how we treat the openness of homosexuality. Because while in many ways we are quite tolerant, including tolerant of public displays, at the same time, there's a certain level of conservatism, both from religious bodies, which is somewhat understandable, right? Once it doesn't go too far. But also even in certain aspects of local and regional culture that is not necessarily religious, but will potentially use religion as a convenient excuse. And let me just put it there, right? Certain aspects of Caribbean culture, at least in the past, was quite definitive and absolute with regards to lyrics and the like. Now, granted, I have no idea in 2026 if that was maintained. I was actually surprised it was a thing even, however many years ago. So I'm not entirely sure exactly, how will society respond to something like that. But from what I understand, those couple friends I have who shared with me what it was like kind of growing up and trying to figure things out, there are those who, they are not necessarily certain what they want to do yet. And such a threat over them could be quite distressing, compelling, harmful. And the thing is, and let me just make this point clear, because you might think, oh, well, what does that have to do with me? I don't use Grindr, I'm not gay, blah, 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 blah. They are exploiting human psychology. The details of the victim does not have to be the same. Because like I said, usually what's one of the other ways you hear about stories like this in the press? It's when somebody is the outside person in a married couple, is the third wheel, right? Or when one of the married couple decides to engage an outside person. Either one of those could be vectors to disgrace someone in public life. It's happened before, including but not limited to that whole time period where cancel culture was at its zenith. The criminals are right now attacking what they view as, I believe, a vulnerable subsection of society because there's a lot of unknowns there. And at the very least, there are a lot of members of that society who probably, because of those unknowns, they feel vulnerable and they are not secure in revealing certain things. But that doesn't mean that they can't branch out to other areas, right? That doesn't mean they can't branch out in a more forceful manner. Instead of catching you, they might set you up. And then how they set you up could become more and more elaborate. The question, of course, is do you put yourself in a position to be vulnerable to various schemes and setups and frauds? And there are times when we would think what we see on TV is too fantastical to happen in real life. But then there's also those situations in real life that if you tried to write it in a TV script or a movie script, the average person will look at it and say, well, that's way too unrealistic. No one is going to believe that. Your movie, no one will believe your movie, only to then hear, well, yeah, but it happened in real life. And I don't necessarily want to spell out the scenarios with regards to how the criminal element could try to widen this sort of extortion tactic. Because again, it's always, not granted, the trick is the criminals will probably figure it out. They will look for vulnerabilities. And they will, once one figures out a way to exploit it, it really takes one. Like anything else with regards to the human condition, trends and following trends, why not everybody wants to innovate. Not everybody wants to try to break new ground, which is maybe that's a good thing, because if there were more criminals who were looking to try new things, we might have a whole host of random crime. But enough of them will seek out ill-begotten gains more and more. And they'll find a way. Because there's also that situation with the ship. And I'll be honest, I never really thought about this being a possibility, right? They're going to board a ship in harbor to rob the occupants on the ship. Now, I have no idea if, to what degree there's enough valuables on the crew, because this, I believe, was we're not talking a passenger ferry or a cruise ship. We're talking a cargo vessel. So I don't know how much wealth crew members of a cargo vessel carry, This could have been a situation where maybe the perpetrators, they kind of knew something behind the scenes with regards to how these ships operate, how they maybe do their payroll. I don't expect them to pay their crew in cash, but, I don't know. But the thing is, they did it. They found a new target, something new to go after. And I don't know how far it could go, right? Now we have to wonder, what other boat might somebody get a bright idea to target? We already know that fishermen at times could be quite under pressure with regards to piracy threats while out at sea. And the equipment they have, while we might not always think much of it, it's not necessarily nothing, right? And depending on the engines, could be quite valuable. So 12 armed men boarded this vessel. This is one of the things also that I think we need to pay attention more and more. The size of the crew on any one specific job. Because if this is a 12-man crew, first of all, that means potentially the amount of money they stole from the occupants of the boat, right? It seems like a lot. Well, the things that they got seem valuable. They have to sell it now. They have to fence it. That's a whole. I have no idea if they're able to sell a GPS system and an inflatable dinghy and a small engine, right? Then they have to split it amongst 12 people. Probably not going to last that long. Probably they're going to need to rob someone else in the not too distant future. But I think this goes to show that if you're in a situation where you want to think, nah man, they're not robbing X, they're not robbing Y, they're not robbing this kind of shop, they're not robbing this kind of business, they're not robbing this kind of establishment, they're not robbing in this kind of environment, they're not robbing in this area. Maybe don't make those assumptions anymore. Because I would not have thought, oh, cargo boats on the harbor, 12 men will come on a pirogue, like if there's Navy SEALs. So, who knows what will happen next? And then it goes to the next point where the Commissioner of Police, he went on to defend the firearm situation, the requirements that they have with regards to investigating, doing background checks, ensuring that the individuals who are applying for firearms, there's no red flags. It is something that seems reasonable to say, okay, yes, you can be approved to get a license to have a firearm. Now, one of the things is when you read what the commissioner is reported to have said to justify his position, right? One of the things he said is there was someone who wanted a firearm to kill pests on his land. Now, apparently they went They saw his land, 5 acres of bamboo. They questioned what type of pest. On some level, that seems like a very human thing to do, and maybe he omitted out details. But I would have thought, unless you, like he might have omitted, we spent 12 hours and we could not see the pests, right? So maybe you're questioning if there are pests, right? Maybe pests was a euphemism for people you think are bandits or trespassers, right? But you went and checked the land. Commissioner did not say that they couldn't see, notice, observe, or find pests. He just questioned what type of pests, right? It comes across as though it was a sarcastic remark with just, well, we went and we saw it for 5 minutes, we didn't really see anything, and we left. Which means that potentially they did not dig deep enough, because maybe it's not that they couldn't find the pest, just that they didn't find what was there. And they didn't do a thorough search or a thorough check into the scenario, into the situation. I'm not saying that that is what they did, but based on what was reported, the commissioner's remarks comes across as a careless throwaway thing. What kind of pests are there? Don't bother me with your nonsense, man. But he takes an example that says, all right, look at this example. He's not trying to protect himself. I'm not entirely sure why he wants the gun. He's giving me a reason that seems like nonsense. I'm not giving him a gun. All right, fine, that's one case. Then he points out that before I was commissioner, there was a man that had 12 guns without an investigation, right? A man make an application in 7 months' time, he get 12 guns without an investigation. I tell you, I don't hold water in my mouth to talk the truth. No investigation in that file. So he just applying and getting approval. What is the reason you want 12 guns? You're Rambo? Now, one of his predecessors basically called him out on this example, right? Call the name. Because there were over 20 to 25 people that had over 10 firearms before I was commissioner of police. But, well, I believe it should be, but I didn't have a problem then, and no, but he didn't have a problem then, and he was in the police service for decades before me. Now, this is from former Commissioner Griffith. Now, I don't know, this is the thing, the commissioner, as far as I'm aware, is an intelligence guy. I don't know if he was anywhere close to the firearms unit and knew what was going on with applications, to be fair to him. So he was potentially, in his previous positions and roles, completely ignorant, not in a derogatory way, just in the literal sense, of what was going on with the approvals process and what was applied for. That said, just saying that someone got 12 guns, it's interesting what's not said, as Gary Griffith points out. Well, name names. And okay, maybe you can't name names. What are other potential pertinent details to beef up this example to make it more pertinent? Because here's the issue with public issues and using anecdotal examples to justify a position. We don't know if you're cherry picking or not. And in this case, we don't even necessarily have concrete, full understanding of the examples, which could, not necessarily actually is for certain, but could mean you're not just cherry picking examples, you're cherry picking details of the examples. Because Mr. Griffith points out, if someone is a firearms trainer, he must have about 15 different firearms. There will be other owners who may be owners of a company with 10 different businesses, and that person may need businesses for security of, well, firearms, I believe, should be the word, for security officers to have. Just by that comment made by that commissioner shows he is intimidated by my track record. Well, that last part I won't comment on. That's a whole other topic of discussion. But I'll say this. before reading what Gary Griffith's response to the commissioner was on that, right? I found it very interesting. What is the reason you want 12 guns? You're Rambo? Well, I mean, what type of guns? You're saying what is the reason? Was there no reason in the file given? And then on what level is that his fault? On what level is that potentially, I don't know, the fault of what process? Or maybe there was a reason that we just don't know about. Because since, you know, no one wants to tell us anything, I can't speculate about it. But I just found the "your Rambo" remark. You see, it could be a very innocent exclamation of just a human reaction to something he feels incredulous. So it's like, whoa, you trying to be Rambo or what? You know, sarcastic, a little bit of a joke, a little bit of levity, right? In order to try to make a point without having to go down into a long, drawn-out explanation. Because we will understand, you know, to some extent what he means, at least on the surface. You're Rambo, why you need all of this for, right? And it's a very normal human response. It's also coming across to me as a very layman's response. But not in the, I am trying to speak on a level for the public to understand, more on the, I'm a desk weenie, I just pretend that I wear a Punisher patch, I pretend to be an operations guy, and I don't actually have that experience. So that's why it's a big deal to me. This is a big deal, guys. This is a big deal. Except there's one unfortunate situation. There's one unfortunate, and maybe I'm wrong, statistic. There's one unfortunate inconvenient statistic that just undermines what the commission is trying to imply with this. I have yet to hear of any report that said legal firearm X was used in a violent crime. Legal firearm was used to commit a murder, to use to rob somebody. Legal firearm was used to attack a building. Legal firearm was used to... I have yet to hear that. In fact, I think most murder-suicide situations that gets reported, I don't think a firearm is necessarily used in them. I could be wrong on that one. But we don't see legal firearms ending up on the streets being utilized by criminals, and then they get the gun. Oh my gosh, this was a firearm that belonged to so and so. I get it. People have lost their guns, and it's a big deal when they've lost their guns, and it's something now that causes all the authorities to have to scramble and all that. I understand that. That can happen. But again, we have yet to see the statistics to say that legal firearms in any way is contributing to crime and is a problem and is a threat to the security of the people. And while I'm not saying, because the commissioner is right in the sense of, you know, you do have to have a vetting process. So the most important part of the example he gave was not the fact that it was 12 guns. It was the fact that, at least as far as he was aware, there was no report, right? That's a problem. That's a problem of accountability. And to some extent, transparency, because now you're missing details, right? But mainly accountability. You can't account for this situation. It didn't matter if it was 12 guns. One gun, no accountability, just as bad, right? That said, he didn't necessarily, as far as I'm aware, try to explain the bit of information that went to the public that denied someone an FEL application. It was not about there were no pests on your land. It was not about I have no reason given to justify 12 guns. It was a set of inane nonsense that basically means the vast majority of us, regardless of what our certification of character says, our criminal record says, our job performance says, our family would say to us in interviews about us, the criteria given to that applicant by the Commissioner of Police, and the Commissioner's response is as to why his application failed, basically imply the vast majority of us don't even bother to apply. You need to deal with a lot of cash in your business. So if you're an employee, there's a very good chance to even bother, right? Maybe if you're an employee in a high cash business, maybe, but then again, you probably wouldn't be applying for a gun anyway if you're just an employee, right? So you have to be a business owner that deals with cash. You have to already survive a crime, or you have to have an imminent threat against you. In which case, if you're the last one there, an imminent threat against you, that is not the time to say, well, here's a gun, go fend for yourself, little Timmy. That's not the time to say, you protect yourself, or some gangster targeting you with his whole crew. Yeah, here's your firearm, here's your 30 bullets, good luck. Let us know how it all works out. Because that's the implication somebody said. You need to have a threat against you. You need to have been a victim of a crime. Because heaven forbid, we got something to defend ourselves before we're a victim of a crime so that we could defend ourselves when the first time we're a victim of a crime. Heaven forbid that. No. The commissioner, who is definitely not Rambo, the commissioner is definitely not Rambo, doesn't see the need for people who are not victims of crimes to have a defensive tool in case they become a victim of a crime. I don't know, that don't really make that much sense to me. It doesn't. So, in this regard, we had a commissioner that more or less behaved in a similar manner. Not very popular. No offense, this commissioner is no better. I just would like to know at what point is he going to be arrested for something or the other by one of his subordinates. Oops, let me not say that too loud. Ironically, the success of the police service, I do have to wonder if it is because of the members of the executive, who at the very least have experience in operations and probably know a bit more about what they're doing than the commissioner is. This whole FUL scenario, I'll go back to what I said a few weeks ago. It's a joke. The commissioner is trying to appear as though, look at me, I'm fixing the system. No, you look like your predecessor. Which is a big joke, given the fact that, politically speaking, it was a promise that has not been kept by the government, if you're keeping score. And this is coming from the guy that warned against giving out firearms too recklessly. I'm saying, yeah, but the opposite now of this nonsense is a little too much to bear. Because the implication is either, as I said before, well, oh, there's a threat against you, here's a gun, go defend yourself. Or, well, we don't actually care if you can protect yourself otherwise. We're not really concerned about that equation. And then there is the consideration, if you actually wore that patch because you did something operationally to deserve it, I suspect you might understand why there are people who like to have more than one firearm. Because here's the thing about the United States. The vast majority of people that have extensive gun collections, the vast majority of them are not the ones committing gun crime. The vast majority of them. The vast majority of the gun crime comes from the jurisdictions like the cities that have stricter laws on gun control. And it's mainly the handguns, and it's mainly someone with one handgun or two handguns. All of the rifles and all of the exotic high-powered weaponry you see gun enthusiasts own, most of the gun crime, whether with handguns or assault rifles, but most of it is with handguns, but most of the gun crimes aren't those people. So, to a layman, to someone that doesn't know much, you could get away with, oh my gosh, look how many guns. That's not too dissimilar to what the previous government did with, oh my gosh, look how much bullets. I didn't realize that the Commissioner of Police was a member of the PNM, continuing whatever unofficial policy was in place when earlier Edward Christopher was Commissioner of Police. I mean, that's what it looks like. I'm not saying he needs to follow what the Prime Minister says. He's supposed to be independent. But the justification is just going way too far. And speaking about too far, I've gone way too long. So with that, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue conversations. There's more about more to say with Ashraf after this. Stay tuned.
Besides,
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan, and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
There are limitations in all healthcare sectors,
Correct.
not just this country,
Yes.
where the numbers will surpass the amount of doctors and
Yes.
nurses to provide that quality care. We're talking about holding a patient's hand, giving them the support, emotional support that they need, advice. That gap,
Yes.
you are providing that pivotal gap, so that really makes you stand out from all other NGOs as far as my experience goes.
As I actually go into the homes also of the patient.
I'm back here to talk about the WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Small with Ashraf Ali, our disaster management expert and soon to be fully retired police inspector.
Good morning, Sean.
You're just counting down new days and weeks, right?
Yeah, that's life. That's part of life, right?
You don't miss the job?
To some extent, yes. But like everything else, you have to learn. There are changes in life you have to get accustomed to. It's not that you want to retire. You hope to go all the way, and that's your final day. I mean, there's life after it. Like in any other job, there's a time when you have to move on, and that's how life is. Like it's changing, so you have to be able to adapt towards that. So it's not simple just to simply say that just moving on. You will have, after a number of years being a police officer, you have that still in you.
Yeah,
but you have to move on.
I'm fairly certain you're very happy when you hear, oh, well, it's carnival, all boots on the ground.
When it comes,
or this period we need to be out in full force for this event. Like it's not the day to day. It is nobody could take leave.
Well, that part I won't be missing that part.
Yeah, you enjoyed your first carnival. You enjoyed it quite some time, I'm sure. Ha. Yeah, you were probably thinking, Ashraf was probably thinking, he's there, Carnival Monday. Hey, somebody needs to call so-and-so to tell him so.
No, not me.
Now, speaking about large-scale events, I think we have, to some extent, we take certain things for granted with regards to safety, right? Because I might come across a bit harsh on this topic that I want to start off with today. There are situations where I guess, and this probably occurs in other countries as well. But kind of take, well, Trini, nah man, it's safe. No one go touch that. No one go steal that. No one go. I have friends that leave their car running and they go in to buy fast food, and I'm like, I don't understand why you feel this is safe. Your car unlocked and it running, and nobody in the car, and you feel this is safe. My anxiety level, I just need to ignore and look away. Now, there was a situation, and I believe we have it on video, where there were multiple people in a parking lot, and one lady was singled out and robbed, right? So, if we could just play the video for the public. So, as the video is unfolding, right, one of the things that struck me was, so I believe it's 3 women, 2 women going to one car, and one lady going to another car. Now, I might be a bit judgmental here, but in my mind, she was loitering. The lady who ended up being the victim, she was loitering too long. The door is open. She's still half out of the car. Her handbag is there, dangling on the outside shoulder of the car. And I understand that people might think, oh, don't blame the victim. But what I'm saying is, look, even in such a mundane process where it's a parking lot, there are other people right there, so you're assuming you're safe. they're not going to be so bold, nobody's going to be so bold to interfere with me. I'm like, I personally don't take those things for granted. I'm getting into the car, I'm going into the car. I'm getting my stuff into the car as soon as possible, I'm locking my door, because I'm not going to assume that they won't be so bold as to interfere with me. And I feel as though she had more than enough time to get in her car, and yes, I might be kind of hindsight is too much 2020, but I believe she had more than enough time to get in her car, lock the door, because that's what I do when I enter a car, lock the door one time. And then she, because I wonder if in the moment, the suspects actually kind of saw her seemingly, from my limited vantage point, just taking her time, just long enough that they identified, hey, this is someone in a vulnerable position. Let's go after it. Because I don't know if they singled her out from the very jump. She now came out of the pharmacy, and there were other people there that were between them and the victim.
It's a hard call to put any blame on the victim per se. All I can say is that sometimes we need to be much more self-aware of our surroundings and our environment that we are in. It's unfortunate that, crime happens all over the world. So it's not that it's isolated to Trinidad and Tobago. That's why you need to be very cautious about how you carry about yourself in these public spaces, in how you operate, moving from one point into a car park, because it's not the first time that someone has been robbed in a car park, because you have persons who are just waiting for opportunities, and these are just persons who look for opportunities.
But wouldn't the public assume, well, when they robbed at a car park, it's because as much as I say she might have been taking too long to get in the car, it wasn't that she was, exposed for that long.
And so there are persons who know for a fact that these criminal elements look for certain areas that they could look for softer targets. They may not have chosen the other two because they may not believe that they was worth anything at all, because they saw a bag, easy grab and a go, right? The possibility that we get some items in the bag, phone and whatever things like, because we know that's how we carry items in bags, in handbags and other things like that. So it's an opportunity that they saw, and we have to understand that we need to reduce the amount of opportunities to these criminal elements. But at the same time, it's a sad state that we are reaching, or we have arrived at, even in a state of emergency, when these type of things are happening on a regular basis. It's a sad reality.
Yeah.
Look at what happened in Barataria. The man, a gentleman, elderly gentleman, was doing work, going about his business, doing work. Yes, he had on a chain, but it might simply be a chain that he had on, right?
Well, because I have seen situations before where people were doing mundane tasks wearing very expensive jewelry. Now, I don't know in this case if it was very expensive, or if it was some cheap thing that he just likes to wear casually. So but you had a good point.
Yeah, so it made up, it brings to the forefront of our situation when it comes to crime, and our enjoyment of our personal items. I would have, if that individual, and this is where we have to realize, persons are purchasing spending their money to the things that they want to purchase. And I'm saying they have a right to enjoy what the fruits of their labor. It comes down to the issue. I purchase a vehicle. I buy a new the person buy a new handbag. I purchase a chain or some gold jewelry that I want to. Am I not, or is it because I have to buy these things, and in order to enjoy it, I have to put it inside my home because I cannot walk on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago without somebody deciding that belongs to me? That is a serious situation that we have to look at holistically when it comes to the issue of crime.
Now, the report says she had a firearm in her purse, 6 rounds of ammunition, And to that, it makes me wonder, is having a firearm in your place ever the wisest decision? Not that
So
it could be robbed, but rather
then,
how readily can you access it?
Well, I did not know that. That was a report.
Yeah, well, the news reported that
another part of the report. I didn't see that part.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm not. This is not to say she shouldn't have done it because there's something wrong with it.
So then it brings the question now whether or not it was targeted.
Well, hold on. Also, $5,000 in cash.
So that is what I'm saying. This person would have now been, or the possibility of this going to be a targeted crime.
I would think the cash even more than the gun. But I could be wrong because I assume you've seen that before.
So then it raises a lot of red flags now as to in the investigation where we determine where the car, how she can remember this car's, all her movements and all of that.
The revolver and the ammunition was recovered. So it seems like they ditched the gun.
Well, that kind of smart to inspect that because that might have been more red flags.
But it's just a revolver with 6 rounds.
But then I am saying that then we talk about self-awareness. Self-awareness of what you're carrying, whether you're carrying cash or any other valuable items in your purse, how you're securing it.
Now, you are not necessarily someone who trains people in self-defense, but my limited knowledge would suggest to me, if you have a concealed carry permit, it's better to have it on you than in your handbag, because then something happens, you have to dig in your handbag. And I mean, I would not have necessarily thought of this beforehand, but this incident highlights what seems now like a very obvious thing in hindsight. If you're a woman and you have a handbag, what are they going to grab? The handbag, because that's what you see.
Yes.
There are videos in foreign countries where people drive by with scooters to snatch handbags. Or if men have bags as well, right? So I don't know if that's the most practical place to put a firearm to defend yourself.
It's not the most practical place or not the most suitable position, because if you're carrying a personal weapon, it should be on you. When I mean on your body, because you have to access it. You have to have the easiest access. Yes, you have a bag. Your bag can fall off. It could be lost in a struggle. It could be grabbed and then your opportunity to defend yourself is going down the road, right? So you're given more. You're increasing the risk associated with not getting the opportunity to defend yourself, and unfortunately, you keep mentioning these things to individuals. And the whole issue of firearms keep coming up. So we always have the conversation of firearm, who should be given a firearm, the level of responsibility towards a firearm. So there's more conversation when it comes to firearms at the same time.
Well, I was going to say, because I just spoke about the commissioner, and I have what I view, despite the fact, and I'll get to why I say despite the fact, I don't like how the commissioner has presented his firearms policy or informal policy or what have you, right? Not saying that I don't like what it is. I don't like what's been presented, right? Now,
so that presentation is consistent with what is in the law. And that is where we have the challenge. That is where this country has a challenge. When you look at the Firearm Act, it didn't say anything about the criteria for a firearm. It said 25 years and over.
Yeah, but then to what extent is his presentation consistent with the law in the sense of it being...
And the law also states that he is the person to grant or deny.
Not this
in between the gray areas is where, in the absence of guidance, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service puts in some policies or some guidance, some criteria in terms of investigation. That is, I'm saying, that part of the process and that part of the policy is where we have inconsistencies. So it's not to blame him. I'm not blaming him, right?
The thing is, he is making it out as though he is in charge and making the decisions.
But he is.
So if there are any inconsistencies still existing...
No, so he is in charge of the final say as per the law.
his presentation implies, look at me doing this great thing.
Good.
Not look at me having the responsible final say. So he is indirectly pulling a lot of the merit or blame for the situation onto himself.
And I could agree with that aspect of it, but I'm not blaming him for the procedures, or should I say, addressing what is the shortcomings of the law.
I don't think he's addressing it, though.
I think he is, not to the extent that the public will need, right? Because there's we agreeing.
You said it, not to the extent that the public will need. Not, you didn't say what the public will want. You said what the public will need.
So first things first. If the law under the Firearm Act states 25 years and over, is it the basic criteria?
Yes.
So you can make an application.
Yes.
Within the police service, there is a procedure or a standing order as to some of the requirements that they would ask. Depending on investigation and depending on the individual, there are certain things that they will keep on asking, right? That is where I am saying there's a lot of gray areas with, because what they may ask you, they may ask me differently.
Right.
Because of the investigation and
maybe the different investigators.
Different investigators, you have different.
Yeah.
So now we have to come back. We have to come back that it should not be we ask different questions for different investigations. We must always have a little standard thing that these are some of the criteria you fill, and then there's some open things based on if you don't fit this requirement, there are certain other then you can ask some other questions to fit the requirements.
But the thing is, as much as I have an issue with all of that, I'm also the guy at the same time. So it might seem as though I'm schizophrenic on this whole thing.
A normal thing.
Of course. That said, that this stand your ground law plus firearm is not a cure-all for crime.
It is not.
Right?
And it should not be.
And one of the reasons why I had that stance was for things like this, where just having the gun and having the law that says you potentially can use the gun in whatever situation you find yourself, that's not enough. Because in this situation now, we don't know to what degree her proficiency with the firearm was. What we do know is that she found herself in a situation where she can access it. And one of the issues I have is, look, at the end of the day, people need to understand, having a gun is fine. Using a gun means you're in a confrontation. That could go many different ways.
Yeah.
And that now is the thing, because you could draw your gun and shoot your gun, and still it doesn't mean it's going to go your way. So this situation now, would you say, because I think she's somewhat lucky that all they wanted to do was rob.
And that, I would say the same thing too, because sometimes you really don't know. There was another video circulating, I don't know if you saw that one, where a vehicle was stationed, a black vehicle was, pickup was stationary, a vehicle pulled up to it, two men came out of a vehicle and went to the driver and tell him come out of the vehicle. Now, if we watch the video, the person would have dropped off some persons into a home and they remain on the road idling in the vehicle.
Yeah.
A vehicle approach, and when the vehicle, the suspects approach, and they ran straight towards him, and they pointed the firearm at him, and they questioned him until he come out of the vehicle. What was interesting also is that they asked the question, is it automatic or gears? I believed it was a gears. You know, there was someone in the vehicle, another one of the suspects could drive gears, so call that person to drive gears. They were prepared.
Right.
Understand?
They knew what they were doing.
Understand what they are doing. They are not, when the level of preparation and how they're operating, or how they operate, they know it could. Because if I'm going for pickups, pickup could either be manual or automatic.
It's quite possible. They tried to rob a car before and it was manual and none of them could have drive manual. So now they know, get a man that could drive manual.
So you always have. That shows, and unfortunately the person, the vehicle, they didn't do anything to the person that took the vehicle, right? Because they had a gun, so that's a pause. But we have to understand, and we are not understanding, the criminal elements out there are looking and being creative enough. They are studying, they are developing their skill set to be criminals. We, as law-abiding citizens, are not understanding that we need to be more self-aware of our environment, understand that where we go, not every place in Trinidad and Tobago you could just, or should say, do anything that you want, or even jump in go park up on the side of the road with your vehicle idling and say, okay, all right, everything is okay. We said that you have heard that there are type of vehicles that they tend to thief go after. So if your vehicle falls into that category at this point in time, you have to be more self-aware of what you have. You're not going to jump in a vehicle. You're not going to jump in a vehicle in a parking lot, because even though the entrance to the parking lot was right there, and open the vehicle, keep your door open with everything like that, and now starting the vehicle, lock your door one time and start your vehicle.
Yes.
Reduce the opportunity of someone coming straight to your door and opening your door. Let them have to be pulling the door. Give yourself ample time to make or defend yourself in some aspect, or drive away or something like that.
And one of the things when you're in a car and there's the potential of criminals to confront you like what they did with this X-Trail, because I think about these things, right? You have a small window to act. The key is, if you're not careful, you might crash into somebody, you might crash into a light post or something, and more importantly, if you misidentify the situation and perceive a threat that isn't there, then you cause an accident for nothing, right? So it's one of those things where, you know, on some level you have, if you aren't at the very least psychologically prepared for the potential situation, when the moment comes on you, most of us, not all of us, but most of us will not know what to do and will hesitate in the moment, and then it will happen. I saw there's a video where in some country a guy's driving a car and gunmen in another car try to like cut him off, and he starts just reversing one time. He just makes decision one time. Now, I don't know why the passenger jumped out of the car, because I'm like, you just asking to be victimized, right? But the driver, he knew what he was about, and he was able to identify the course of action I need to take now. Because it can happen, but I guess it comes back down to awareness. Because just look, you're going into a parking lot, are there other people around? Is there security around? Because there's a situation with a home invasion where the security guards actually responded to a potential breach. I think it was Launch Park, so it was like a gated community, right? But the point is, I wouldn't necessarily expect in 2026 security guards to be armed and willing to go towards potential danger, right? I believe they perceived that someone had a gun. I can't remember if it was that there was an assailant with a gun or not, but shots were fired. Right? But you're in a parking lot, fine, where's the security? Is there no security? Is there anybody around me loitering? Who is that? Because I'll say this, when I see someone that I think is loitering, rather than putting myself in a position, committing to whether going in the car, driving into my yard or whatever, I might loiter myself, but in another direction.
Yeah. So it's not something that the average person is familiar with. I would even say not even many law enforcement officers are familiar with being self-aware.
Do you think culturally we have a blind spot?
Well,
because why so serious? Well, you know, not as serious.
We believe that it can't happen to me. It happened to somebody else, and when it happened to somebody else, we look for all the reasons why it happened to them, not understanding they were just a target, and anyone could be a target, right? So we have to understand that personal safety is important, and how you view personal safety is more important if it is that you're also carrying a firearm, because it's not safety of yourself alone. It's protecting a device that has the potential to cause more damage if in the hands of the wrong person, and sometimes it could be used against you. Now, I have my different opinions about persons having firearms, right? I wouldn't say I am on the fence. I am a little more on the fence for persons owning firearms.
Right.
But at the same time, owning firearms have a lot of responsibility. Carrying a firearm has a lot of responsibility. Owning the firearm is one. You can own a firearm and have it secured in your property, in your safe in your home. I'm talking about owning a firearm and carrying a firearm. Carrying a firearm about with you is a serious responsibility. You always have to be aware that I have on my person a firearm. You know, we are very close. We greet each other close.
Yeah.
Right? And if you have a firearm on you and sometimes someone hugs you or they feel something strange on you, the first thing is, what going on here? What you have there? What you have there? And it's exposed. Some person, I have saw persons carry firearms, and while they're carrying firearms and they move to different positions, type of clothing they have on, you can actually see it being displayed.
Right.
So, and they are unaware that it's been displayed. So then you are just place yourself in a targeted position by someone where the criminal elements who are looking for a firearm can now target you. So it's not just having a firearm alone, Sean. It's also how you carry, and that's why when the commissioner mentioned the issue of level of responsibility and persons like that, persons take it to the wrong, take that wrong in the context of responsibility. But there are a lot of incidents where responsibility and being responsible for a firearm don't really work with each other.
Now, we need to move on because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, you had an interesting point to make, because yesterday I made the observation, you know, we've been speaking about all of the priorities on financial resources and how we were going to meet them, right? I would like, I guess you would like, and others would like the police to have body cameras, but there's so many different things that the National Security Services probably need that, you know, if we added all up the money, might be difficult to find. Same thing to do with public health, same thing to do with education. And then I thought randomly one morning, haven't really heard about the fire service much, only to have a conversation with people observing how dry the landscape is right now, right? We were talking about it just before the show. Am I right to think, listen, we should be at least a little bit concerned because it only takes one bad incident and then we'll start to have regrets and say whose fault is this and go through the whole process like seemingly every year or every other year?
Well, during this period, you know, the drier seasons, there's a lot of bushfires taking place. Compound that, or I should say, that could be compounded with the lack of maintenance of certain areas when it comes to the amount of overgrown vegetation that is going to be dried in and around persons' areas. There is always the risk of these bushfires, ending up destroying homes.
And compounded by any water supply issues like in Tobago right now.
Well, that is another issue. That is another big issue that you're supposed to deal with. I have seen the northern range relatively quiet for a while, and I live close to within the northern range, and normally you would see. I am expecting to see the vegetation start to burn just now.
Okay.
Because sometimes it is just the fires appearing and vegetation. Now, when you look at some of the locations, over the years, these areas are now become more residential.
Yes, because California, the vegetation doesn't look as thick, but they had those freak winds that damaged them recently.
Yes.
Now, we might not have the winds, but our mountainside, the vegetation, look, it's kind of thick.
It is thick.
And we kind of build close.
We build very close to some of the vegetation. So it is a risk associated with that, and any accidental fires that probably happen because person might be still doing agriculture slash and burn will go out of control. It would have that. I know forestry over the years I have seen that they do their control burn to avoid.
Well, is this the same forestry that?
Well, right now I think they're shorter staff at the same time.
Okay.
So then that poses another challenge with respect to that.
No, but with the fire service though, after the last set, there was the whole situation with the MP and her house fire, right, being one fire of 3 that night. And then I believe they bought a couple of fire trucks, right?
I think it was 6.
Right, but different types. So yes. Not all were necessarily water trucks or ladder trucks or the like. And I don't know if that was enough to service the needs of all of the stations that didn't have enough tenders.
See, now the question a lot of persons will be asking, how much is enough? But at the same time, having conversation with my fire colleagues, right, and senior fire colleagues, they have indicated that, and I was misinformed by my personal misinformation. Now we make little jokes about it, but at the same time, being placed on the correct footing, you will get more information. Is that these tenders, you don't go and purchase these tenders by any place.
Yeah.
Specific type of tenders is built for purpose. So they would purchase a brand of vehicle, and they will go to the supplier, a team will go, and they will build to specs of what the tender is we use for Trinidad and Tobago. It takes some time for them to build these things because they have to build in the infrastructure that they need, the entire cabins and whatever they need to put all the equipment on it. So yes, they will take some time.
There's no off-the-shelf option?
No, it's no off-the-shelf option. Build to spec through tendering process. Even during the tendering process, the person builds, they still have to send a team to make sure that everything is being built according to the standards. And sometimes they may have to, there are different ways that it means to get it. But at the end of the day, it takes some time, sometimes a year, 2 years to get those tenders in. It costs a lot.
Yeah.
And that being said, it is not, when you say you want 10 tenders, let's say you want the public saying that we only seen 3 tenders in a station, you don't have enough to supply this entire geographical area. Sometimes when you look at the fleet in the fire service, it's a depleted fleet. And the fleet is not a fleet that you can say every 5 years we could change over because it costs a lot.
Yeah.
Right? So there must be a balance. I am glad that they got 6 new tenders. I listened to the political argument of who started the process and when it finalized. But at the end of the day, whosoever the administration was, they had to commission those items, and they would have taken some credit for commissioning it. Somebody takes some credit for engaging and putting the money together. But at the end of the day, who is benefiting? Is it going to benefit a political party? No, it's benefiting the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and that is the end result. So I don't care who political party want to take credit for it, it's going to benefit the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's why I say, in the same context, when the police officers are applying for vehicles, or we need to get equipment for the vehicles, is it a political thing about which party is going to be benefiting, or who started the process, who it ending? At the end of the day, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago must benefit from the resources that our taxpayers' money are putting out. So I am hopeful that these 6 will benefit the stations that they are sent to, and the citizens would benefit from additional units.
Just doing a quick search, aerial truck That could be as much as 1.3 million, I believe, US.
US.
Right? I don't even know if we have any of those. That would be the big ladders, not just carrying a ladder, but the big ladders with the buckets, right?
Yeah.
The water tenders, those are a bit cheaper. That's only 110 to 350K, but still, when you multiply by 6, it'll still be millions of our dollars.
Exactly.
Or, you know, not necessarily millions, 1 to 2 million. So it's not cheap. The time is also the pressing thing. I guess for me, it comes back down to the issue is, you know, on some level, you're kind of putting a price tag on human life, and potentially.
Then we have the unfortunate situations that the public has been unfair to the fire service in some aspects. That because they have 3 tenders, it means that you're supposed to reach in a situation. Sean, sometimes you don't have control over how fast a house will burn, because the fire officers are not responsible for what you have in your home.
Yes.
A lot of persons have a lot of things that could fuel a fire faster.
Not just fuel a fire, but where? Because I would imagine if you have clothes and cupboards that go to the ceiling, and the ceiling is wood, even if the walls are brick, then it's very easy for the whole ceiling to catch. And then it kind of doesn't matter if the structure doesn't collapse, you know, because everything in the house is going to go.
Sometimes it's unfortunate how we blame some of our responding agencies, because the blame is already they always try to put the blame there when something happened, you find a blame, but you don't, like when it comes to personal safety, you blame that the police is not around, but what you fail to carry out take some responsibility for your personal safety.
I mean, listen, I like the next guy, when I hear police sirens or ambulance sirens, always I'll question if are you just trying to cut through traffic, but at the same time, we do have too much traffic. And it's not that every emergency is going to be false, right? So when you have situations now where you're trying to get a fire truck cutting through traffic now, and depending on where it's located, if it's a narrow street, if too many people look into Mako, if too many cars stop to Mako, so all of that could contribute.
Yeah, and they may, in some situations, they may just try and be not even responding, but try and get back to get back to a police station to respond, because the reality is that sometimes that might only be 1 or 2 vehicles available to them. They may have already gone to some situation, deal with a situation, and had to return back to base to proceed to another location.
That's the other thing. Some people might say, why didn't send all the fire trucks? Well, because we've already seen, you know, Lisa Morris Julian's home was, I believe the reports were that was the 3rd fire. And that's why you can't send everything. But after 2 fires, we don't have enough trucks where we're going to still have things in reserve to treat a 3rd fire. I would have never thought the scenario of a 3rd fire was going to happen, to be honest. I thought 2 fires, that's the thing you have to be able to cover.
Nobody would have considered that. But unfortunately, it happened.
Yeah, that's the scary part. Because consider this train of thought. I don't know if we could say every fire station needs enough equipment to deal with 3 fires. So the implication is, even if the fire service was fully equipped, assuming that another station would have had to respond and there would have been a delay, even with full equipment, there might not have been an effective and surefire way to treat with that scenario.
No, this is just out the box for consideration. 3 tenders. Do we have the available manpower to staff 3 tenders to operate with? No.
But some fires need more than 1 tender.
And exactly. So that's what I'm saying. It is not about just equipment alone. Do we have the manpower to facilitate? Same thing with community in a police station. You may see 5 vehicles parked, but out of the 5 vehicles, you do have sufficient manpower to manage the 5 vehicles and have the 5 vehicles out.
And at the end of the day, and I guess now comes the question, what, I am assuming there's no more money to be had. There's no more funds that are not just free, ready to be spent on anything, right? And then when you talk about personnel, that's reoccurring.
Yes.
So I guess what are you willing to sacrifice? Because I already said I am willing to sacrifice some other things for more police equipment to make sure the police have enough officers and equipment to do their job, right? But now, then the nurses are saying we understaff, right? Now maybe if you have proper staffing levels, you'll save money on the overtime, all right. Now the fire service might also need, and the Coast Guard might also need. So we're not even talking about, well, do you want to fix the potholes or have security services? We're talking about one emergency service and another emergency service.
So look at this from this perspective. It's a different type of conversation, a different perspective to look at. You do not have sufficient manpower. The process, there's a process to increase your manpower, because it's not about just moving manpower around, because if it's short, you're still short.
Yeah.
Right? You could maneuver 100 pieces. At the end of the day, you still have 100 pieces.
Yes.
When you need 150. So if you need 50, and I'm just using this for analysis, you need 50 more bodies. 50 more bodies means 50 more persons in your service that you need to train. There's a process and a time frame for training.
At a cost.
And a cost. So it don't happen like that. It's a process, training, and then even when you're training, they cannot be placed into the high response that you need because they are very green to the whole environment. That's going to take time.
Assuming they all pass.
Well, that. So look, so then here's your options, and there's where it's a lot of critical assessment when it comes to managing your resources in that cut. You have an experienced group and a need-by experience group to carry out the function, so I will allow overtime. Because I cannot bring in same numbers in the time frame that I need. So then I make a decision whether or not we want to go allow our body to get overtime, just like how the nurses, just like how the police service operates with respect to overtime. It's a balancing, but at the end of the day, there's an argument for it, right?
But look, at least in other countries, like the States, truck drivers have mandatory rest.
Right.
Airline pilots, and I believe this is an international standard, has mandatory rest. I find it very weird on some level that we're like, oh, the people who are supposed to keep you alive in the hospitals, the people who are supposed to rescue you in fires, and the people who are supposed to confront dangerous criminals. Yeah, it's all right if they're sleep deprived. like I could understand an emergency situation, like in a one-off. Oh my gosh, there was a thing that happened this week, so a lot of officers and nurses and firefighters and doctors didn't get rest, and paramedics, they didn't get a lot of sleep for a couple of days. But these situations seem to be persistent. And that's one of my issues with it, right? Because we could be lucky with fire. The thing with fire, I believe, and especially in TNT, you could be lucky one year and unlucky the next.
So true.
And the question is now, what is the threshold? Is one household enough? Or does it have to be multiple households? Because there was that situation that we spoke about previously. There was a situation in Maraval where the children were trapped and couldn't get out. There was a situation in another house fire some time ago where the child ran back into the house, and so on and so on. And depending, the Met says it's not a drought yet, but if there was ever a time to not be unlucky, and you don't get to choose when the dice don't roll your way, it would be times when the water is short. And usually it's not that, oh, we were unlucky, it just happened when there wasn't enough water available. No, there's usually some amount of correlation. It happened in part because there's not that much water available. We get the water from the environment if the environment is dry.
So this, if I would put my disaster management hat, this is where preparation and planning for these things come. We can't clean drainage on waterways when the rain starts. We cannot start doing clearing of vegetation, right, in the dry season.
Yeah.
When you're allowing the green vegetation.
Well, don't forget the people doing that, they also might be understaffed right now too.
No.
So everybody understaffed.
This is a bigger issue. It's more complicated and complex.
Because there's another public entity that's also potentially underfunded for this work, you were saying?
Yes.
I don't want to take, I want you to say it, I don't want to say it.
We have the corporation, we have the ODPM, we have forestry. When it comes to...
But you pointed out, local government corporations,
yeah,
they you know, it's not like they're swimming with cash either.
And so part and parcel of our planning, it means that we have to plan, and planning for disasters costs money. Mm-hmm. Money is that we don't want to spend in these areas. But at the end of the day, if you spend that amount, you save plenty more in the long run.
It's similar to COVID, right?
Yes.
If you preserve your health now, it's cheaper than trying to get the big procedure that costs thousands of dollars later.
So that's why...
sorry, not COVID, NCDs.
So when you have disasters and plan for disasters, the planning process is costly, because planning means training for personnel, mitigation of hazards, that potential hazards that we have, right? And putting measures in place to increase in your resources and your stocks that you would need to respond, is building a response capability. Because when a disaster, you can't worry about, well, we don't have this and we don't have that, it's already starting.
Does it seem as though flooding gets more attention, but only during the rainy season? Because as you're saying, now is the time to clear the drains, to clean up all of that stuff. But it seems as though we only think about it during the rainy season, and it's mainly flooding. We don't necessarily think about fire prevention in the same kind of light, because flood prevention is a political thing.
Yes.
But again, as you say, it's not a year-round thing.
No, it's not. And even the aspect of trying to regulate and curb the amount of illegal dumping in certain areas, right? Where it compromises the water courses. And we always come back to enforcement, right? Simple. But we don't.
Now, I just want to move on. I want to touch on, before, depending, in case we run out of time, the whole situation with the terrorist watch lists, or the terrorist designations.
Okay.
And that has become a thing now, at least in part locally with certain stakeholders. One of my issues with this is I would just like our society to figure out a way to be consistent, because I find it very interesting that, and I don't know for certain, but it seems as though different stakeholders were speaking out with regards to our citizens abroad not being able to come home. And our new crop now is speaking, for whatever reason, it can appear, which is one of the things that it's not that I'm saying it is, it can appear that they're speaking on other foreign interests with regards to, right? And I'm like, first of all, I would like if we could be consistent, right? Because there's also a section of the community that they have fears with regards to our nationals. All right, well, what about these potential foreign interests? So, but we have San Fernando line. So let me take the call, and then we'll try and wrap this up quick. San Fernando, good morning. You're on the air.
Morning, Sean. Good morning, Mr. Ali.
Morning.
Two things quickly, Sean. In respect to the granting of firearm user's license by the commissioner, there was a case brought against refusal of the commissioner that was ruled on yesterday, and the court ruled that the imminent threat that the commissioner used for refusal was not consistent with what the Section 17(4) of the Firearms Act states. The person must have a good reason, but not. So they say the imminent threat that the commissioner applied was incorrect.
Right.
So there's a new ruling with respect to how the commissioner applies his criteria, as Mr. Ali was talking about there. The second thing about that same incident in the car park with the lady, I am totally upset with that woman for having a firearm in her handbag. There are too many people in Trinidad and Tobago. When a firearm is issued to you, a firearm user's license, and you have it, and you go out and you have your firearm not supposed to be in a bag. There are men and women that continue with this ridiculous practice of not having the firearm on their person. It's supposed to be on your person, not in your handbag. And if it is that you're going out, then modify your clothes so you could have your firearm on your person. They can't tell me you're wearing a tight shirt so you can't conceal the firearm properly. Then put on something different. If you're going out with pants and then modify your pants. Go to the tailor, fix your pocket or something that your firearm could be on your person. Too many people in this country don't know how to carry the firearm properly, and in that instance, where you see that happening, that lady, that handbag, I think a license should be revoked. Serious. You have a good day, good weekend, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. While I don't know if I would agree, I would say it's not an unreasonable consideration, to be honest, right? I wouldn't say, at the very least, the conversation could be had. Now, we do have another caller. I think it's from Faizabad. Caller, are you there? Caller, good morning. I'm not sure if we still have the call. Oh, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
I heard the argument with the overtime and what have you, but in very many instances, it doesn't stop at the overtime, because you go into organizations, even where I would have worked, and there are certain people who are favored for overtime whenever overtime comes up. So it leaves a disgruntlement going down the chain of command rail. And so it's not simply that, we short staff and we this and that. Sometimes they orchestrate the thing to make it look like that. A lot of people plan their lives, especially in state agencies, around overtime money. I could say that without fear of contradiction. I know a lot of policemen who would work a lot of overtime and save it up to go to Miami and New York for 3 and 4 years. But the thing is, if it is that you're overworked, you would complain. But I'm never hearing that level of complaints coming up that would force the authority or the state to deal with it in a very real way. Everybody has positioned themselves so they could, eat our food, basically. That is what we're at reach to. And we need to revamp the thing and work it the way it was designed to work. I heard Officer Ali said, it takes time for training and what have you. Yes, I agree with that. But all that was factored in the formation of the police service. So that should have been an ongoing process. And your commissioner, together with other officers, like many other state agencies, should have been advocating vehemently. But no, I'm not seeing that happening, because the overtime thing kind of nice for a few of the people. Have a nice day, my brother.
Thank you, caller. That's a fair point. The only organization I know that's on the record of complaining about shortages as an issue for their union or association is the nurses.
Yeah.
Right? So that is a fair point, because I'm pretty sure, I wouldn't say it's universal. There are some officers who are overworked and would prefer not to be, but there probably are quite a few officers who also, that's part of their job. We have Dabadi on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Hi, Sean. Morning, ASP. It's always wonderful to listen to your program. Friday morning, I want to wish everybody a safe weekend, because the whole thing about driving in TNT is becoming so critical that I don't know what the drivers are thinking about Sean and ASP. They're really overdoing it. But let me throw in my little 2 cents to the threat of terrorism in TNT. And it is in my opinion, I want to be very careful with the words I'm using. It is in my opinion that the idea of terrorism is an issue that has been raised by the USA, and our politicians, whether it's past or present or those in the future, that actually raises that answerness. However, whether the presence of terrorism is at a high level or at a low level, I do not see it warranted here in Trinidad and Tobago. The police are quite aware as to what they're doing. They have their surveillance, they have their interaction with Interpol and other agencies, international agencies. So I think it's a big mistake that the government is actually raising this whole thing with the 3 Muslim groups and actually taking action against them. I know that the police has been doing an excellent job in the past, but I don't think that we as citizens of this country should be faced with those things that are made public. Thanks for the opportunity again, and you all have a blessed day.
Thanks, Dawadi. I mean, that segues us great because I do want to touch on it. We have very limited time. I won't go into all of my thoughts about it, at least not most of them. But just your take on it.
Well, I'm supporting the caller. He's along the same line that I'm thinking. Is it that these Islamic fundamentalists in those regions have a significant influence in Trinidad and Tobago society? I don't think so. Right? We do not have an Islamic state. We have a Muslim population, right? We have Muslim population who have different views in what is taking place in the Middle East. We do have, yes, we had persons who left this country, went to fight with ISIS because they had a view of what was taking place in
that area,
in those countries against Muslims. If there was a situation outside of the 1990, because a lot of persons brought that into the whole context, which is 1990, and it was Islamic. It was an Islamic group that was fed up of how some things was happening in society. It just happened to be an Islamic group. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay, good. So that was then vented and all of that. But today, I think the bigger conversation is whether or not it's Islamic fundamentalists is our problem as terrorists, or terrorists on the whole when it comes to gangs, terrorist type gangs, criminal activity, criminal groups that form themselves who are doing terrorist type group functions, because a terrorist is not terrorist fundamentalists alone, who from a religious perspective alone. They are persons who cause terror in our country. We could argue that there is in fact criminal elements who are putting fear in the lives of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, not just fear, but trying to affect the government and the policies and society in a systemic way.
So then on that side of the argument, I am saying that yes, we have terrorist groups or groups that can be classified as terrorists, or some of our gang affiliations.
But just to be short, don't you think there's some consideration should be to be proactive? Like you don't want the problem to happen and then try to close the barn door when the horse already bolted?
So that is what I'm saying. I am in support of it. But trying to bring the narrative straight across to say they are a direct influence on what is taking place in our country. Being proactive, I'm comfortable being proactive.
Because I actually agree with you. I don't believe that maybe there's something that they're not telling us. But until they do, I don't believe there is anything direct right now. My one thing is for the local stakeholders who kind of spoke out against it, it's not that, my issue is how you speak out against it could make it seem to some people that you are somehow connected to these things and you are somehow benefiting from something from these things. Whereas I know that it's not that simple, right? A lot of it is, well, if this is the stance that our government takes, legitimate grants and financing now might decide we don't want to get caught up in a terrorist witch hunt kind of situation.
The sad reality is that the terrorist groups are Muslims.
Not just that, they're very regional.
No.
In that they're very specific, their operations and existence is very specific to the regions that they operate in. They're not like we're around the world committing whatever.
But the basic principle is that they are Muslims, whether they're Shiite or Sunnis, as the case may be, is not what I'm saying now. They are Muslims.
Yes.
That translates to how persons view Muslims in Trinidad and Tobago at the same time. Negative view. After 1990, Muslims was viewed differently.
That's why I'm saying these stakeholders coming out against the situation, if they're not careful, they will make certain people who are quick to jump to conclusions look as though, hey, so what happened? You get money from them? So you support what they're doing? And that's one of my concerns,
I don't think that the entire Muslim population of Trinidad and Tobago is being targeted unfairly, because not the entire population of Muslims is in that category. So
the problem is if the procedures, if it's not careful and accurate, you know,
yes,
some people could get unintentionally.
It could be misinterpreted and unintentionally bring about a different
bad outcomes.
Outcome for
unintended bad outcomes.
Yeah. So, but
which is a real fear.
But it's a real fear. But for me, I am saying being proactive. I don't see an issue with being proactive. How you put across the proactivity, you have to consider the long-term effect. A long-term effect, and I guess the Ministry and Legal Affairs will also consider that, taking into consideration the groups and how they interact and the messages that they putting forward. So, I think for me personally, I think the more critical issue right now is the groups of criminal elements. Yes, we have groups who say they are Muslims and Sixes and Nines, they have all kind of thing, but when it comes to being being fundamentalist in terms of having how they behave or their beliefs are so strict according to them, how they interpret the doctrines. The Quran itself is a different conversation altogether.
Well, here's the parallels, right? And we hope that we never see what happens in Mexico happens in Venezuela and then with us. But Mexican cartels, yes, they deal in drugs, but they also attack government officials, and they started to, deal with oil and gas in criminal ways or illegal ways. Well, terrorist organizations attack government officials, deal with oil and gas, but also some of them deal with drugs.
So that's where,
and they both smuggle.
That is where the local grown terrorist concept comes to the fore. We have,
but it doesn't. Our potential local terrorism doesn't have to be Islamic.
That's what I'm saying. So no, I don't want to bring two together.
There might be some sort of financial or logistical connection where criminal organizations will do business with each other. Doesn't necessarily mean it's an extension of each other.
No, it is not.
Because there is a travel route.
Yeah.
Of course, locally, people go to Venezuela locally in order to go on pilgrimage. So there is a potential way for people to come back the other way. That's the one vulnerability that I saw.
That can cause problems for the Muslim community.
Yes, that legitimately.
Who legitimately wants to go and do their Hajj right, and travel through that channel. So that can cause some challenges there now.
You know, I feel I did not consider it, and I apologize. But also, that whole thing with Venezuela probably caused issues for that as well. We didn't necessarily speak about that at the time. But we have to go. We have to wrap up. So I want to thank the callers for calling in, giving their opinions on the matter. I want to thank Ashraf for joining me once again. I don't think we have any comments today, but that's fine because we don't have any time anymore. Because pretty soon we have Andy Johnson at 10 a.m. This is 10 Questions, of course. One of the best interviewers, always one of the most interesting topics that you could see on local television. Don't miss it, 10 a.m. coming up right after the commercial break. Sean Michael Small, Ashraf Ali, this is Dr. Manada BSN. Stay safe. Have a good day. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. And when I say stay safe, think about being more aware of your surroundings, right? Don't take things for granted. You never know. It doesn't take much, like with that video in that parking lot. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The home of Caribbean content is growing and we welcome you.